My dad cheated on my dying mom, and now his mistress wants me to love their baby. The baby is 4 months old. My mother has been dead for 11. The math means my father conceived a child while my mother was in hospice, and the hospice was in our living room, and the living room is where she died, and the dying took 7 months, and the conceiving happened during the dying, and the during is the word I cannot forgive. My mother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer when I was 20. She was 51. The diagnosis was stage 3. The options lasted 14 months. My mother came home for hospice. The living room became the room. The hospital bed replaced the couch. The IV pole replaced the lamp. The room that had held Christmas mornings and movie nights, and the specific Saturday afternoons where my mother read novels in the recliner, and my father sat across from her pretending to read the newspaper while actually watching her read, because watching her read was his favorite thing. My father was present for 6 of the 7 months. In the 7th month, my mother was mostly unconscious. The hospice nurse said, "She can still hear you." My father said, "I need breaks. I can't sit in this room 24 hours. I understood. I said, "Take breaks. I'll sit with her." He took breaks. The breaks were 3 hours, then 4, then entire evenings. He said, "I go for drives. I clear my head." What the drives produced was a woman named Vanessa, who lives 22 minutes from our house, and who my father has been visiting since month 6, and who became pregnant during month 7, while my mother was unconscious on a hospital bed in a living room that still smelled like her perfume, because I sprayed it on her pillow every morning so the pillow would smell like her and not like the hospice. My mother died on a Wednesday, 4:12 a.m. I was holding her hand. My father was in the room. He was in the chair. He was crying. I believe the crying was real. I found out about Vanessa 3 months after my mother's funeral. My Aunt Pamela told me. She said, "Your father is seeing someone." I said, "Already?" She said, "Not already. Still. He's been seeing her since your mother was in hospice. Still." The word that converted seeing someone after the death into seeing someone during the dying. I drove to my father's house. He stood in the doorway of the house where my mother's hospital bed had been, and where the bed was gone now, and the room was a living room again. He said, "I was lonely." I said, "Mom was in the next room." He said, "She was unconscious. She was gone before she died." I said, "She could still hear you." The nurse said she could hear. I talked to her every day. I sprayed her perfume on her pillow so the room smelled like her and not like death, and you were driving to an apartment 22 minutes away doing the thing that made the baby you are now asking me to celebrate. He cried. I left. Vanessa called me last week. First contact. She said, "I know this is hard, but Charlotte is your sister. She's innocent. She didn't choose when she was conceived." Charlotte, my half-sister, 4 months old, named after my father's mother. Vanessa said, "I want Charlotte to know her sister." I said, "I am not Charlotte's sister. I am the daughter of the woman who was dying in a living room while Charlotte was being conceived in an apartment. Those are different positions in the same story, and the positions do not produce sisterhood. They produce evidence." She said, "That's not fair to Charlotte." I said, "Nothing about Charlotte is fair. Charlotte was conceived during my mother's last month of consciousness. Nothing about the timing is Charlotte's fault, but the timing is also not my responsibility." She said, "Your father loves you." I said, "My father loved my mother too, and the loving didn't prevent the leaving, so the loving is not the standard I'm measuring by." I avoided my father for 2 weeks after Vanessa's phone call. The silence was mine. Then Pamela called. She said, "Vanessa reached out to me. She wants to have lunch. She said she wants to understand the family better." Vanessa was not sitting still. Vanessa was building something. A campaign. A slow, careful, polite campaign, where she reached out to everyone around me one by one. I drove to Pamela's house. She sat me down at her table and she said, I told her no, but she was polite. She sounded reasonable. She said Charlotte deserves to know her family. I said, "Reasonable is the word people use when they want you to forget what they did. She is not reasonable. She is strategic. She called me first." I said, "No. Now she's calling you. Next she'll call grandma." Pamela nodded, but there was something in her face that I did not like. Something soft. She said, "The baby is real though. Charlotte didn't do anything." I heard it. The crack. The small, thin crack in the only ally I had left. I drove home. There was a package on my doorstep. Small. Wrapped in brown paper. No return address. Inside was a framed photo of Charlotte, 4 months old. There was a card. It said, "Your sister looks like your grandmother. I thought you should see." No signature, but I knew the handwriting. Vanessa's. I held the photo and the baby did look like Regina. The jaw, the forehead, the way the eyes sat wide apart. The resemblance was a weapon, because the resemblance connected the baby to the family I was trying to protect. I put the photo face down. Then I picked it up again. Then I put it in a drawer. Then I called my father. He said, "I knew you'd call." I said, "Did you send the photo?" He said, "Vanessa sent it, but I told her she could." I said, "You authorized the delivery of evidence to the person the evidence wounds." He was quiet. Then he said, "I want you to come to dinner on Sunday, at the house. Just family. Pamela will be there. Your grandmother will be there. And Charlotte." This was not an invitation. This was a room he was building. I said, "I'm not coming." He said, "Your grandmother asked for you. She said she needs to see you. She's not doing well." Regina, my grandmother, the woman they named the baby after without asking, the woman who loved my mother Toinette the way you love someone who made your family better just by being in it. I could not say no to Regina. I said, "If I come, it is for grandma, not for you, not for Vanessa, not for the baby." He said, "Whatever gets you through the door." The whatever. That word. He did not care why I came. He cared that I would be in the room, because the room would contain me and the room would contain Charlotte, and the containing would be proximity, and proximity is the first step toward normal. Sunday came. I drove. 26 minutes. I counted. The house looked the same from the outside. I walked in. The living room had been redecorated again. New curtains, new rug, dark, thick, covering the floor where the hospital bed had sat for 7 months, and the recliner was gone, replaced by a love seat. And the love seat is where Vanessa was sitting. Vanessa was holding Charlotte. The baby was in a pink outfit, and Vanessa was holding her like this was her living room, and these were her curtains, and this was her rug. Vanessa looked up at me and said, "Thank you for coming." The thank you. Those 2 words were a claim. I did not respond to Vanessa. I did not look at the baby. I walked past the love seat and through the doorway and into the room where Regina was sitting. My grandmother looked older. 11 months of grief had done what 11 years could not. She saw me and her eyes filled. She said, "Come here. Let me hold you." I sat beside her. She took my hand. Her fingers were thin and warm. Regina said, "I miss her every day. Your mother was the best thing that happened to this family, and the best thing is gone, and the gone is the thing I cannot accept." I started to cry. This was the first person who had said your mother, without following it with but, without following it with and Charlotte, without following it with moving forward. Then Regina said something I did not expect. She put her coffee cup down and she looked at me and she said, they named that baby after me. I didn't ask them to. I didn't want them to. Your father called me from the hospital and said, we named her Charlotte. And I said, why would you do that? And he said, because you're the strongest woman I know. And I said, the strongest woman you knew was your wife, and your wife is dead, and you named your baby after me instead of acknowledging that the baby exists because your wife's death created the space, and the space is the thing you filled with someone else. I stared at my grandmother. Regina had not softened. Regina was furious. Regina had been furious in silence because silence is what women of her generation do with fury. Then Adon walked into the room. My father. He saw me and he saw his mother and he saw our hands together and his face did something I had never seen before. Fear. He stood in the doorway and he said, dinner's almost ready. Vanessa made mom's recipe, the pot roast. The silence that followed was a sound. Regina put down her coffee cup. I watched her hand tighten around the mug. Her knuckles went white. Toinette's recipe. Vanessa cooked Toinette's recipe. In Toinette's home. On Toinette's stove. The recipe that my mother made every Sunday for 20 years. The recipe that she wrote on a card in her handwriting and kept in the drawer by the stove. Before I could speak, the front door opened and Pamela walked in. She read the room in 2 seconds. She said to Aden, tell me Vanessa did not cook Toinette's pot roast. Aden said, it's just food. Pamela said, it is not just food. That recipe was your wife's. Your wife who is dead. The woman who taught it to me at this table. That is not food. That is an erasure. Adan's face hardened. He said, I am tired of being punished for surviving. I survived. I am still here. I am trying to build something. I said, you didn't survive. Mom survived for 7 months in that room. Mom survived the chemo and the radiation and the surgery and the hospice and the hospital bed and the IV pole and the losing of her voice and the losing of her recognition and the losing of everything until the only thing she had left was a body in a bed and a daughter who sprayed perfume on her pillow. That is surviving. You survived by leaving. He did not answer. He walked back through the doorway. The dinner did not happen. The pot roast sat on the stove. No one ate it. Then Vanessa walked in. She was holding Charlotte. The baby was against her chest and the baby's face was turned toward the room. She said, the baby needs to eat. Can I warm a bottle? The question was a move. The move was to bring the baby into the room where the argument was happening because babies end arguments. Babies are shields and shields work. And that is when I looked at Charlotte. Really looked. For the first time. The baby had Aiden's eyes. My mother used to say, your father has the most honest eyes I've ever seen. She said it at the dinner table. She said it on the porch. The most honest eyes she had ever seen. And those eyes were on this baby. The same color, the same shape. The honesty was a lie. It had always been a lie. But the eyes were real. Regina stood up. She walked to Vanessa. She stood in front of the woman holding her namesake. And she looked at the baby. She looked for a long time. Then Regina said, she looks like Toinette's mother. Around the mouth. The room stopped. Regina had just connected the baby not to Aden's family. Not to Vanessa. Not to herself, even though the baby carried her name. She had connected Charlotte to Toinette. Vanessa blinked. She said, really? I thought she looked like Aden. Regina looked at Vanessa and her voice was quiet, but her voice was the kind of quiet that is louder than yelling. She said, she looks like whoever I say she looks like. I've been in this family longer than anyone in this room and the looking like is mine to decide. Vanessa blinked again. She did not have a response. Then the thing happened. The thing I did not expect. Vanessa said she needed Charlotte's diaper bag. She came back with the bag and set it on the couch and opened it and started looking for the bottle. A piece of paper fell out. It landed on the floor near Pamela's feet. Pamela picked it up. Her face changed. All at once. She said, what is this? Vanessa reached for it. Her hand was fast. Too fast. She said, it's nothing. It's a receipt. Pamela held it away. She read it. Pamela looked at me. She said, this is a receipt from the home medical supply company from 8 months ago for a baby monitor. 8 months ago. My mother was alive 8 months ago. My mother was in the hospital bed 8 months ago. I said, Vanessa wasn't living here 8 months ago. Why would she have a receipt from here? Vanessa's face went still. From the doorway, Aden said, give that back. The command. Give that back. Not, let me explain. Not, it's not what you think. Give that back. Commands are confessions because commands are what people say when the thing in your hand is proof. Vanessa was in this house. Not just the apartment 22 minutes away. This house. My mother's house. The house where my mother was dying. I turned to my father. I said, she was here, in this house, while mom was in that room. Adan said, it was one time. She brought me food. She never went in the living room. She never saw your mother. I said, she was in the house where my mother was dying. She was in the cooking area where my mother's recipes were. She was in the hallway that led to the room where my mother was breathing through a machine. She was here, breathing the same air as my mother. He said, she was helping me. I said, she was replacing mom before mom was done using her own house. Regina sat back down. The shaking was visible from across the room. She looked at Adan. She said, you brought that woman into Toinette's house while Toinette was alive? Adan said, Mom, please. Regina said, don't, Mom, please me. I raised you. I raised you to be better than this. Your father was not a perfect man, but your father never brought another woman into our home while I was still breathing in it. The breathing is the minimum. The minimum is you don't bring someone else in while the person is still breathing, and you couldn't manage the minimum. Adan was crying. The tears were coming, and the tears had worked before. The tears had worked when I found out about Vanessa. The tears had worked at the funeral. The tears had worked for 11 months because the tears said, I am in pain, and pain is the thing that makes people stop pushing. But the tears did not work this time. The crying was not currency anymore. I made a decision. I made the decision that I was not leaving. I had been leaving every time the pain got too big. The walking out was the retreat, and the retreat was the pattern. And the pattern had protected me for 11 months because retreating meant I did not have to say the things I was carrying. The pattern ends now. I said, I have been trying to understand you for 11 months. I have driven to this house and sat in my car and tried to build a version of you that makes sense. A version where a man can love his wife and leave his wife at the same time. I cannot build that version. The version does not exist. Adan looked at me and his face crumpled and he said, I was breaking. You don't know what it was like to watch her disappear every day. A little less of her every morning. Her voice went first, then her eyes, then the recognition. She looked at me in month 6 and she didn't know who I was. My wife looked at me me and I was a stranger. Do you know what that does? I said, yes, I do, because I was there too. I watched the same thing. I watched her disappear and I stayed. I stayed in that room and I talked to her even when she didn't know who I was, and I sprayed her perfume on her pillow so the room smelled like her and not like death. And I did that every morning, every single morning, while you were driving 22 minutes to an apartment where a woman knew your name. Then Vanessa spoke from the doorway. She said, I didn't know he was married at first. Pamela said, at first? And then? Vanessa said, and then I did. And I stayed because he was in pain and I loved him. I said, you loved a married man whose wife was dying in his living room. That is not love. That is availability. You were 22 minutes away and my mother was in a hospital bed, and the hospital bed is not competition, and you knew that. Vanessa's composure broke. Her chin shook and her voice came out higher and thinner, and she said, I am not performing. I am trying to give my daughter a family. I said, I am not her sister. I am the daughter of the woman who died in that room. Charlotte is the daughter of the woman who was in this house while the dying was happening. Those are not sisters. Those are evidence of different timelines that should never have overlapped. And then Adon said something I did not expect. He did not defend himself. He did not say, I was lonely. He said, your mother knew. The room stopped. My blood went cold. I said, what? He said, the last week she was conscious. She saw my phone. A text from Vanessa. She couldn't speak by then. She could only look at me. And she looked at me. And the looking was the thing. The looking was everything. She knew. And she couldn't say anything. And I couldn't say anything. And the not saying is the thing I have been carrying for 11 months. And the carrying is the thing that is killing me because she knew and she died knowing. The room was silent. Pamela put her hand over her mouth. Regina closed her eyes. I said, she knew. She was lying in that bed, unable to speak, unable to move, unable to do anything except know. And she knew. And you let her know. You couldn't even give her the mercy of not knowing. The perfume on the pillow. I was spraying perfume on her pillow to make the room smell like her. And she was lying there knowing that her husband was with someone else. And the knowing was the last thing she carried. And the carrying is the thing you did to her. And the thing you did to her is the thing I will never forgive. Not the affair, not the baby, the knowing. You let her die knowing. Adan collapsed into a chair. He folded. He said, I know. I see her face every night. The looking. The way she looked at me. That look is the thing I brought into every room for the rest of my life. This was the first honest thing my father had said in 11 months. I did not comfort him. I did not cross the room. I did not say, it's okay. It was not okay. I turned to Vanessa. I said, you knew she knew. He told you. Vanessa did not answer. The not answering was the answer. I said, you knew a dying woman found out about you and you continued. You got pregnant with her husband. You are standing in her home holding a baby that was conceived after she found out and before she died, and the conceived after she found out is the thing that makes this not a love story or a comfort story or a grief story. It makes this a cruelty story. Regina stood. She walked to Aiden. She stood over her son. She said, Toinette knew. She died knowing. Adan could not look at his mother. Regina said, I have loved you for your entire life. I have defended you for your entire life. I defended you when people said you married too young. I defended you when people said you weren't enough for her. I defended you because defending you was my job, and my job was my love, and my love was unconditional until right now. Right now, the unconditional ends, because you let that woman die with that knowledge in her body. You put that knowledge in a dying woman's body, and the pudding is the thing I cannot carry for you. You carry it. You carry it yourself. I left the house, not running this time, walking. I walked to my car and Pamela followed me and she said, what do you need? I said, I need to go to Mom's grave. I need to spray the perfume. I know it doesn't work on stone. I know it doesn't make sense, but the spraying is the thing I did, and the thing I do, and the doing is the only thing I have left of her. Pamela said, I'll drive. We drove together, 20 minutes to the cemetery, not 22, a different distance, a different direction. I stood at my mother's grave and I did not say anything about Adan or Vanessa or Charlotte. I said, I'm sorry you knew. I'm sorry the knowing was the last thing, but I need you to also know this. I stayed. I was in the room. I was holding your hand. I sprayed the perfume every morning. The last thing you knew was not just him. The last thing you knew was also me. And the me is the thing I hope you carried too. I have not met Charlotte. Not today. Maybe not ever. Maybe someday. On a timeline that belongs to me and not to Adan and not to Vanessa. If the meeting happens, it will happen because I chose it, not because I was moved into it. The choosing is the thing my mother never got. The choosing is the thing I will keep.